Here, I was just up here about 6 weeks ago and spoke to another Tarrant County Tea Party, so we're excited to have a double whammy to be able to talk with your group as well. As you can imagine, our house is always a busy place with 8 kids, 16 years old down to 2 years old. So we're very, very blessed, and like you, our household's been very depressed this last week with the outcome of this election, and I'm afraid I don't have very good news for you on the state front either, and this is being done by Republicans. So, I don't know if I'm going to cheer you up a whole lot, but I hope that I can at least educate you, because there's a lot we can do on our state level. It's not just about federal. In fact, we have more power to affect our state legislation than we do in Congress. So, let's get started. I'm sorry the print's so small, I tried to make the print bigger on the other slides. But here's why we're in the situation we're in, and why our legislators have been turning to massive widespread tolling instead of an affordable gas tax funded freeway system that we've always enjoyed in Texas. This is from a really great article by a friend of mine that wrote for the Lone Star Report, and he said the main reasons Texans are stuck in traffic is a massive failure in public road policy, the lack of reforms and inefficiencies at TxDOT. The fact is, public roads are a low priority for the state. In 1980, Texas spent 15% of the state budget on road work. In 2009, they only spent 4.8% of the state budget on road work. State government spending also has gone up and risen nearly 300%, or nearly tripled, from 1990 to 2010. And that's above population and inflation. Tripled spending. Spending as a percent of population is nearly tripled in 20 years. Health and human services spending rose 406% in that time period, and education spending 276%. So this is why they're turning to toll taxes. And these are not traditional toll roads, because I know that you all are very familiar with those here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as well as in the Houston area, where you have traditional toll roads. But these are not traditional turnpikes. As I like to say, it's not your mother's toll road. We have a new kind coming along, and it's on our existing corridors. The traditional turnpikes were completely new roads. The voters got to vote on them. The money controlled stayed with Texans, and we think a well-conceived toll road would pay for itself without any public money. In other words, the users of the road are actually paying for the road, and that the toll would be removed when the bonds are paid off. But now they're turning to actually tolling existing roads and rights-of-way, which is a double tax, and they're using hordes of gas tax money to now subsidize losing toll projects. So we're all bailing them out, even if we don't drive on them. Then there's this new type of arrangement called a public-private partnership. And they're the kind of all the rage now, particularly for states that are going broke. Texas is certainly not in as bad a shape as many other states are. But when it comes to road debt, as you'll see, we're in pretty bad shape. Public-private partnerships, or P3s, is another term for them. It's really a marriage of private corporations with the state, and it's granting these special interest groups monopolies over our public infrastructure. Some people call it fascism, some call it corporatism. There's actually elements of cronyism in there as well. And if you actually read part of Agenda 21, how many of you are familiar with Agenda 21? Oh, very good. So we're in a well-educated crowd. But public-private partnerships are part and parcel of Agenda 21. If you look in Agenda 21 of the transportation module in there, their goal is to abolish private property and restrict mobility. And one of the ways they can do it is with widespread tolling. And really, public-private partnerships aren't just privatizing or contracting out to have a private company build our roads. We've always done that. That's not what this is. These are sweetheart deals. Private toll roads, we call them privatized toll roads, are using the state's exclusive eminent domain powers to grant monopolies to the private toll operator. It's really eminent domain for private gain. It's a lot like the Kelo case. It's just wrapped up in a different colored bow. You remember the Kelo case? Kelo versus the city of New London, Suzette Kelo. And that was when they took her land and gave it to a pharmaceutical company because they could make more money off of a pharmaceutical company than they could off of her individual home and property. So this is what's really happening with this. We've always had eminent domain for roads, but now they're handing your property over to a private developer for private gain for a half century at a time. It also limits the expansion of our free roads. They're called non-compete agreements. So literally within a certain mile radius of these privatized toll roads, they're never going to build or expand any of our free roads for up to 50 years at a time. That's a long time for growing counties like y'all are, and down our way too. It actually has provisions in there that allow them to manipulate our speed limits to drive more traffic to the private toll road. As an example, we'll see that a little bit later on SH 130. It just opened. You probably heard about it. It's the fastest road in America, 85 miles per hour. Well, that is a Sintra, Spain-based toll operator that has exclusive rights to that road, and they have manipulated the speed limits on the free routes. Number 4 is they can charge toll rates that are very punitive. When it's a public toll road, naturally, we the people, if they jack up that toll rate too high, we yell and scream and can have some accountability with our elected officials. But when it's a private company, who are we going to complain to? A board of directors in Spain? Yeah. And so really they're privatizing the power to tax. And that's what Hitler did. So that's kind of scary. And that's why they can get away with charging 75 cents a mile. How many of you are aware that you're going to have 2 foreign toll roads open next year in this area? A couple of you know. This is very good. But a lot of you don't know. And it's the same company, Spain-based Sintra. It's on the LBJ and portions of Interstate 820, I-30, and 121 are going to be privatized lanes. So it's allowing these corporations the power to tax. Well, here's the example of the manipulation of the speed limits on State Highway 130. First, Sintra secured this contract, they were awarded the rights in 2005, but they actually inked the deal in 2007. And this is for just segments 5 and 6. It's the southern segment. TxDOT owns and operates the initial 4 segments. And it goes basically from Georgetown, north of Austin, around to meeting I-10 near Seguin, about, 30, 40 miles east of San Antonio. So we're talking about the part from just south of Austin called Mustang Ridge down to San Antonio. And this has a non-compete clause in it. So there's actually a map, and I have a link to it that you'll be able to see on our website. But it links to the contract, and it shows you the non-compete zone of all the area around South Travis County into Guadalupe County and even parts of Bexar County that cannot have their free roads expanded for 50 years. TxDOT had an incentive for TxDOT to increase the speed limit as high as they could get it on this SH 130 toll road. And they got more money from Sintra. TxDOT received more money from Sintra based on how high TxDOT set that speed limit. The maximum was 85 miles per hour, and that gave them the maximum payoff of $100 million. They were willing to part with $100 million of their own money to get the highway department to maximize that speed limit to 85 miles per hour. So now our speed limits are being set in our state based on financial incentive instead of on public safety. Then they dual designated parts of free Interstate 410 and I-10 as SH 130, presumably to entrap more people into taking this road thinking it's a free road. Then they get out to Seguin and I-10, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere, although people in Seguin get mad when I say that. But it's really rural out there. There's really no development, no housing, no nothing. I'm sure they were just ranches that they plowed this thing through. But at the end of the day, they're entrapping people because there's no way north until you get on Sintra's tollway. So this is the kind of manipulation that's going on by signing these contracts. They also socialize the losses and privatize the profits. Is that not what upset us about TARP? That's exactly what they're doing, and that's exactly how they're setting up the financing of these public-private partnerships. It eliminates due process when you're contesting your toll bills, first of all. Then it puts the taxpayer on the hook for the losses while the private investors get guaranteed profits. And they use massive amounts of public money and debt to subsidize the toll projects that can't pay for themselves. In fact, on 2 of the deals up here in your area, the LBJ is more in Dallas County, but the North Tarrant Express is over here. And on the North Tarrant Express, $1.5 billion of a $2 billion project is coming from you and I, the taxpayer. 3/4 of the money is coming from you and I, yet you're going to have to pay a toll to drive on. The private operators only bring in 1/4 of the money to the table. And $500 million in gas taxes went into the LBJ project. And the fact of the matter is, these contracts cost the taxpayer 50% more, whether it's on the front end of construction or over time with the toll rate. And you can see from Senator Robert Nichols in the Express News, this was in 2007 when we managed to pass a moratorium on these contracts, said it's designed to extract exorbitant toll rates. Yet, in both 2009 and the 2011 session, this same senator voted for the contracts. So it's never what they say, it's what they do. Got to check voting records, which we do for you. If you want to stay in touch, please do sign up on our email alert. P3s cost 50% more than public toll projects, and it's always best to keep the projects public versus private because roads are monopolies. It's not free market. It's not like just being able to buy whatever car you want, make and model, or going down the grocery aisle and picking out which kind of branded chips you want to buy. This isn't free market. This is truly government-sanctioned monopolies because there's only one Interstate 820. There's only one 121. And that was set in committee by an expert in public-private partnerships, and he was part of the guy that finances these deals, and he said that we shouldn't be writing these kinds of contracts. So I'm going to review a little bit now what happened in the session last year on legislation related to transportation and property rights. And so I'm going to blow through it as fast as I can because we have a lot of material to cover so we can have questions at the end. But first of all, there was a bill. We feel it was the worst session since 2003. 2003 is the year that they passed this huge omnibus transportation bill that nobody read. Yes, they do it here on the state level too. And it had the Trans-Texas Corridor. It allowed these regional mobility authorities, which is basically like a second-tier bureaucracy. It's like many TxDOTs. It's duplication of effort. It's a waste of taxpayer money. It had quick take eminent domain. It had tolling existing roads. You name it, it was in there. All kinds of borrowed money. Before that, we were pay-as-you-go. So it was a really bad session. Well, last session rivaled that horrible session in 2003. And one of them was the Davis-Jackson bill. Now, Davis here, I'm talking about Representative John Davis, not Wendy Davis. Who just got reelected. And then it was Mike Jackson in the Senate who carried this bill. But what this did, it was actually written by a British firm, not even an American or Texas company. Lobbied for this bill from the top all the way down, went to the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker, and got this thing moved through, even though there was lots of opposition that we tried to bring to bear on this. And it actually spreads public-private partnerships to every other kind of infrastructure besides roads. So now they can privatize schools, nursing homes, ports, telecommunications, utilities of all kinds, likely water, but I'm trying to remember if they listed that specifically in the bill. But basically any kind of public infrastructure, pipelines of all sorts, so if the water's going through a pipeline, it could definitely apply to water. And what they're doing is allowing them to raid taxpayer money. If you look on that section, the red there, taxpayers now can secure the private entity's debt. They can take loans of taxpayer money from the state infrastructure bank, and they're a party to the eminent domain proceedings with the state on these deals, and there's no limit, no oversight, and no expiration on that bill. So they can literally do this to anything. And we've seen it happen in cities like Bee Cave, Texas, which is kind of a suburb of Austin, where they literally had a private operator come in and say, sure, we'll build you your city hall, but we're going to ask for all this extra land around that city hall so that we can build what's like a strip center shopping mall and profit from charging lease, exclusive lease agreements with all of these companies, or all these stores surrounding this city hall. That means they took way more land than was actually needed for that city hall. And those people that originally owned the land that had it condemned with eminent domain now don't have the option to develop that land themselves. And so it's taking away your private property rights and handing it to the special well-connected interests that are in Austin. Then there was the TxDOT Sunset Bill. This is Senate Bill 1420. By the way, SV stands for Senate Bill, HB stands for House Bill, in case you didn't know that. And this was carried by Representative Harper Brown, who's out of Irving, and Senator Hager. And this was the TxDOT Sunset Bill that allowed 15 more segments of Texas road to be privatized in these public-private partnerships, in these sweetheart deals. That was a bad deal. We fought all this, by the way, but obviously lost. Then this was tolling in perpetuity. This was HB 1112, also passed. It greatly expanded the authority of these second-tier bureaucracies called RMAs. It stands for Regional Mobility Authority. It allows them to legalize something called system financing, which is basically Robin Hood. It allows them to take toll revenues from one segment to go build or borrow against to build more toll roads somewhere else. So it's basically socialism, redistribution of wealth, right there. And made it all legal, even though you and I would say it's probably questionable about that. We do have a constitutional protection against perpetuities. In Article 1, Section 26 of the Texas Constitution, it forbids perpetuity, but I've been told by all of the lawyers we work with that we can't challenge it until there's actually been a toll held in place after the bonds are paid off. And since these are all new projects, most of them are not even open yet, we can't sue. But I believe it's unconstitutional. It also allows them to borrow money using other borrowed money. This is exactly how they propped up TARP and the subprime mortgage crisis. By the way, the first public-private partnership on the federal level that we're aware of, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So again, this is leading us down a very wrong road. And it also, in that bill, allows them to raise your property taxes to build toll roads through something called transportation reinvestment zones, as if we're not already paying enough. Then SB 19 expands every kind of tolling authority, not RMAs, so that applies to the North Texas Tollway Authority and the Harris County Toll Authority, which are regional and county toll authorities, which are a little bit different. But this expands their control over our highways by under something called primacy. So basically, what they have to do in federal documents is they can't even, they say, start environmental work or do anything on a road until they can show funding for it. So what they've been doing for the last 10 years is to mark everything a toll road so that they can get started on it. And if money comes along, they'll make it a free road. But everything's marked a toll road. Well, by marking everything a toll road, that gives your toll authority primacy to get development rights over that project instead of TxDOT. And then, even if money comes along, if your toll authority's got a hold of it, it's going to be a toll road, even if there's money to keep it a free road. So it's really bad. It also legalizes system financing for all the other types of tolling authorities, and it allows them to own the road in perpetuity. Now, do you think a tolling authority is going to take a toll off a road if they own it in perpetuity?
Nope.
No. That's why they did this in the bill, because it was illegal prior to that for them to keep a toll in place after the bonds were paid off. But now, they can and will do it. All right, then, eminent domain for private gain. Sadly, SB 18, this was carried by Charlie Guerin, so you know that name, and Senator Craig Estes, also from this area. They authored what they called, in Craig Estes' own words, a carefully brokered special interest bill. You and I, landowners' property rights, weren't invited to the table. It expressly allows taking your land and giving it to a private entity for a laundry list of public uses, but really it's about economic development and blight. There's exceptions for that. And you remember Prop 11, I want to say it was back in 2009. It was on the ballot, and it was promoted as this great big answer to the Kelo case on property rights, but we were one of the few groups around the state that opposed it. I found out there was a couple others. But we opposed it because before, the Texas Constitution was silent on eminent domain for economic development and blight. Prop 11 opened that door. It's now in the Texas Constitution that the government can take your land for certain economic development and blight purposes. So that's why we fought that. And now they put it in another part of the statute. The vague language also means that landowners are going to face expensive, very expensive legal battles to try and get a bona fide offer out of anybody condemning their property. And we found out that there's more than 200 different types of entities that can condemn your property. They actually don't even have a complete list of all of the entities that can condemn property using eminent domain in our state. That's how out of control eminent domain is. And I'm talking private developers, in some cases, have the right to condemn property. This should only be used in matters of public necessity and by governmental entities that we can, pressure if they're doing the wrong thing. So that's a bad deal. We managed to get something good out of the bill, which was they changed the term public purpose into public use, which was a stronger, more strict use of eminent domain. But the majority of the legislature voted down, making it only matters of public necessity. And I was really shocked by that, watching all these Republicans vote against having eminent domain only be used for public necessity. Then SB 875, this applies to a lot of folks in the Fort Worth area where there's been a lot of oil and gas drilling through the years, which we're not opposed to, but this bill would have actually granted immunity to oil and gas polluters if they damaged your property, your well, your water supply, whatever, and contaminated it. It would have granted them complete immunity, and they passed that bill.
Is that Hancock, Kelly Hancock?
Yes, oh sorry.
Are
That
you
was
Senator?
Kelly Hancock and Troy Frazier. We managed to get the bonded amendment stripped that allowed this granting of immunity. So we got that bad part off the bill, but I'm telling you, you got to watch them like hawks. And here's what they didn't do during the session. This is the things that we advocated for. Stop the rating of our gas taxes, and actually all of our road taxes. How many of you are aware that 25% of our Texas gas tax money is constitutionally dedicated to public schools. Ooh, a couple of you know. 25% of our gas tax money is going to fund schools. Then, almost another 30% on top of that is going to other diversions. It's going to things like enhancing employee benefits in the comptroller's office and the AG's office. It's paying for public employee pension funds. It's paying for tourism promotion, all kinds of things that have absolutely nothing to do with roads. Meanwhile, they tell us there's no money to fix your road without paying tolls too, which is the most expensive way to get our roads fixed. So they didn't do that. They actually, I talked to the Speaker of the House, who is from San Antonio, and yes, we tried to unseat him. But we're still stuck with him unless we get a new Speaker elected. Yes. So anyway, when he's in our backyard, so I was talking with Joe Strauss and said, are we going to get the gas tax diversions stopped finally? This was last session. And he looked me right in the eye and said he was going to do it. Not only did he not do it, they increased the amount of money to $2 billion instead of $1 billion. Double how much money they take out of our gas tax money and spend it somewhere else. And then we have the same problem on the federal level. 40% of it goes to public transit instead of to roads. Then we have this pot of money called the vehicle sales tax. $3 billion a year that's going into general revenue, not going to roads. If we just ended gas tax diversions and vehicle sales taxes, we would have all the money we need to build every new road we need in Texas without raising a single dime in taxes. And yet they won't do it. Because they see it as Terri. This is what they tell me. Terri, where are we going to find the money to plug the hole in the budget? If we just take $3 billion from here and give it to roads, how are we going to fund what we're funding out of general revenue with that $3 billion gone? And I said, cut. Yeah. Like, I have to. Like, you have to. Cut it. You know, give me a break. So anyway, with state spending having tripled above population and inflation, would it kill anybody if we went back to the 2005 spending levels? No. So anyway, that's our answer to not having tolls. Then, that third thing on that last page, I just say the last one under the federal gas tax. One of the bills that did pass the House, but we couldn't get it through the Senate, which I hope we get through this year, is going to be, or next year, I should say January, is opting out of the federal highway program. We feel that almost all of our interstates, other than I-69, have been built out on the federal level. We really don't have a need for a federal highway program anymore. We need to just devolve it to the states, and that's really what a lot of conservatives in Congress are trying to do. So we would like them to opt out of the federal highway program, and if we do get our money back in a block grant, that would send most of our money, if not all of our money, back to Texas that we send to Washington, which right now we're being shorted by $1 billion a year. That's surprising from the federal government? All right, here's also what they did not do. They did not fix the loopholes in the law that allow them to toll existing roads. There's tons of loopholes. There's at least 7 of them. We had a bill that we tried to get through the House, but Nichols always stops it in the Senate. He's from Jacksonville area. He's now the head of the Senate Transportation Committee, and he's going to be quite a roadblock. And with the help of the Tea Party, we might be able to move him our direction this year. The third thing is they didn't reform TxDOT or hold them accountable. TxDOT was under sunset review for the last 2 sessions, and they did not change anything in the governance of TxDOT. I'm sure you heard about their $1.1 billion accounting error. Of course, they have the Trans-Texas Corridor. They did all this illegal lobbying with our taxpayer money. That was our lawsuit that we stopped them from doing that. So there's a lot of problems with our highway department, and they did nothing to fix them. After 2 rounds of sunset and hundreds of people showing up to testify at Sunset Committee, at the end of the day, they punted. And they also failed to pass those bills that would end these invasive pat-downs at airports and the naked body scanners that really are invasive. I don't want my kids flying. Anyway, what we did manage to kill were these, this is just a sampling. There were over 100 transportation bills that we had to follow last session, just transportation. Crazy. HB 3789 would have resurrected the Trans-Texas Corridor and made it permanent. So we got that killed. Yay. And then SJR 13, this would have removed our constitutional protection against the perpetuities. Remember that section of the Constitution I was telling you about? We killed that. And boy, did they try and get nasty with me over that. SB 513 and HB 1105, it was the same bill, basically, they had the Senate and House version. Same bill, would have allowed our auto lanes to be dedicated to bike lanes and road money go to hike and bike trails. It's a lovely Agenda 21 initiative. And they tried it, I'm not kidding, 4 different times they tried to pass this bill. And this bill started in the National Association of Legislators, and they send these bills home with the people that are Texas representatives, and they send them back to Austin and try and get all these things through. And it's really a top-down federal Agenda 21 kind of thing, not bubbling up from the grassroots. going the other direction. And it was Linda Harper Brown who came back from that legislative seminar and brought these really bad bills. And it would have taken 20%, mandated 20% of all road money would be going to these hike and bike trails, when we already don't have enough money for roads. And then we also stopped the state infrastructure bank from loaning money to private entities. We are not a bank. Taxpayers, we are not a bank. If they want to get, borrow money for a project, then they need to have good fiscal policies surrounding that and have, good numbers so that investors will invest in that. But we are not a bank. Next to pass was the complete repeal of the Trans-Texas Corridor from state statute. Do I hear an amen or two? Yeah. All right. That's 6 long years of advocating. But I have to say, they're just doing it under a different name now. It's called the Innovative Connectivity Plan. It will never be the size and scope the original Trans-Texas Corridor was going to be 4 football fields wide. It was this massive corridor. It's going to take 580,000 acres of private land, and it would have displaced over 1 million Texans for just the first round. Just the first. And there were 4 major ones, and there were some after that. But anyway, it was major to get rid of that. But even that bill got tainted by that speed limit payoff for Sintra. That carried through, of course. So the good, bad, and the ugly on the wrap-up from the session, at least. The good guys, we really had very few, but Lois Colhorst at College Station, representative of the House, has been very good on transportation transparency. She doesn't like these public-private partnership contracts, and frankly, she's been the only Republican champion that we can ever find on this. And that's really pathetic. Lois Colhorst is her name. And then you probably remember hearing about David Simpson, wonderful man. And he's the one that carried the torch on all those TSA bills. You remember he got national attention on Fox News for that. And I'm sure you've heard about how Obama's Justice Department came down to our Senate, Texas Senate, and bullied them around and said, if you pass this bill, we're going to shut down all flights into and out of Texas. And our Texas legislators caved. I cannot believe it. I'm like, the come and take it state caved. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, those are our good guys from last session. And we do have to give an honorable mention to 2 Democrats, I have to say, Ruth McClendon and Yvonne Davis, who is from this area. McClendon's from our area in San Antonio. But both of them did really great work on trying to reform TxDOT. They didn't have the votes. They were, for instance, McClendon was the only one that would carry the amendment to that bill that was trying to get elected leadership at TxDOT, which we believe is absolutely imperative. When you have an unelected board making multi-billion-dollar tax decisions with no accountability to the people, this is the kind of road policy we get. So she did a bang-up job on that, and Yvonne Davis really called them out trying to stop the public-private partnerships, but they still passed 15 Texas roads, most of them up here. So we tried. The bad guys, Larry Phillips, you might know him, Sherman Dennison, he chairs the House Transportation Committee. Robert Nichols is now the Senate Transportation Committee chair. Tommy Williams and Joe Pickett. They did a whole bunch of those bills that we talked about. Charlie Guerin, Craig Estes, Robert Duncan, Troy Frazier on a lot of the property rights stuff. John Davis and Mike Jackson on making those P3s go viral. Virtually all Democrats and 2/3 of all Republicans voted for this stuff. Then the last bad guy I want to mention, because we're going to get into some local stuff now, is Michael Morris. How many of you are familiar with Michael Morris? You ever heard of him? Okay, we've got 1 or 2. He is your executive director of your North Texas Council of Governments, or your COG. If you really want to know where to stop Agenda 21, it's get rid of your COG. The COGS is how they do it. That's how they funnel the federal money through and control our state. So he is your executive director, but oddly, it's really strange how they set it up up here because it's not like this in other parts of the state. But it's also, he's your executive director of your Regional Transportation Council. That's another name for your MPO, Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Let me tell you, Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO, set up by the federal government. There are so many acronyms in transportation it makes your head spin. So don't feel bad if you're losing your mind listening to all this. But bottom line is he is pushing for public-private partnerships. He gets called down to testify in Austin at these legislative committees that I'm at and also testify at. And he is literally lobbying with your tax money to sell off your roads, to do sustainable development, which if you know about Agenda 21, that's what they do this through, is through sustainable development initiatives, which is all your nice little hike and bike trails with road money and complete streets and all this other stuff they talk about. And he's pushing all these rail boondoggles. So, on eminent domain for private gain, I just wanted to let you know that something that has been developing this last summer. TxDOT now is starting to get into the land development business, which is not a good idea for government to compete with private sector land development. But that's what they're doing. They issued something called an RFI, or a request for information, in May to get a developer to do an ancillary facility, that's what they call it. in the middle of State Highway 130, the parts that they operate in Segment 3 in Travis County. This would include a gas station, garage, store, hotel, restaurant, railroad tracks, utilities and telecommunication facilities and equipment, all in the middle of this tollway. I talked to the landowners whose land was taken for this bubble in the middle of the tollway. You can actually see the maps on their website when they had it up. Here's the tollway, and then they have this huge bubble where they're going to put this development, and then it goes back down like this. Well, I talked to the landowners on, the size of this thing, and that were going to have their land taken for this. One set of sisters, their land goes all the way back to their great-great-grandfather that did the original surveying for what is now Travis County with Stephen F. Austin. And her great-great-grandfather got this land from a legal labor of land for doing the surveying work. This land that goes all the way back to as early as Texas was, 77 of their 80 acres was taken. 77 acres of their land they have. A pittance left was going to go to these private developers when they wanted to develop that land and have a gas station or whatever, alongside this road that was going to bring some wealth to their family. And then now they're having to compete with the state. Well, how can they compete when they have a captive audience in the middle of a tollway where you don't have to, once you pay to get on, you're going to stay on, right? You don't want to pay to get off and then pay back to get back on. So it was a huge problem. Well, we went and met with the TxDOT executive director. I got every private property rights group in the state that I could, find anywhere. And I've worked with a lot of them for a lot of years. But we went and met with Phil Wilson, and for once, just by talking to him, they pulled down the RFI. So they're not going to do it. So but my job, I'm trying. I told the landowners, those sweet women, that I'm not going to rest until they get their land back. We have to somehow give them their land back. But they can still do this under that other public-private partnership bill that passed. So we have to be very vigilant, especially on the local level with these convention centers and city halls and projects like that, because they're going to keep trying to do this. And we're going to also work to get that out of statute, because TxDOT's authority to do that, we found out, was originally in the Trans-Texas Corridor section of the code. Well, they also had it hidden in another part of the transportation code that we didn't know about. So we got the TTC repealed, only to find that they still had the authority to do this land development in the middle of the tollways. So anyway, we also have a huge Texas debt bomb when it comes to roads. We used to, prior to Governor Perry, I know we're having him come speak and everything, so I don't want to be all mean, but
what do you mean? Prior
to Governor Perry, we were pay-as-you-go. Under his leadership, we are now $31 billion in debt, just for roads.
Just under Rick Perry.
Just under Rick Perry.
Yep.
That's right.
And I'm ashamed to hear that.
It's very sad. It is. So in less than 6 years, we went from zero debt for roads to maxing out the state's credit card. Add to that, we have state pension funds, $20 billion in the hole, and our last state budget shortfall was roughly $27 billion for the biennium. The legislature added another $3 billion in debt in Prop 12 road debt in 2011, the session last year. We tried to stop the debt. They snuck it in the budget amendment instead of through a transportation bill. So because they're raiding our funds, they're going to come hike other taxes. We've had a wholesale shift away from transportation financing, the most fiscally conservative ways, gas tax funded roads. Now they're trying to do the most expensive way, which is this innovative financing, this multi-leveraged debt, these public-private partnerships, which are going to cost you dearly to use your roads. 75 cents a mile, folks. To take just that one stretch on LBJ, I want to say it's about 10 miles, it's going to cost you almost $10 one way. It's crazy. Then they're shifting to privatizing our infrastructure and placing it under the control of these foreign companies. And I think it's just a way for them to outsource the tax increase to blame someone else for the tax increase, so they don't have to vote for a gas tax hike or something like that. Then it's also eminent domain for private gain. Here's what tolling existing roads looks like. When you have your managed lanes, they call them managed lanes. Notice how they don't even use the word toll. None of the public hearings up here, because we had some people at them, and they never once use the word toll. They never tell you that it's going to go to a private company, much less a foreign company. They never talk toll rates. They don't tell you how it's being financed. They don't tell you that there's public money that's going into the deal. They literally keep us completely in the dark, unless you read the actual documents. And I can help you. If you guys want to do a transportation team, I can help you know how to go through your MPO documents and find this stuff, if you're interested. But this is what it looks like. Very few people get congestion relief, and the vast majority of us are going to be stuck in those lanes. And on the LBJ, when that tunnel opens, where they're putting the toll lanes down underneath, trucks will not be allowed to use them. Because trucks beat up roads more than cars. And that private developer doesn't want to pay more maintenance cost. So he's going to make sure that we, the taxpayer, pay for all the beating up of the roads from the trucks on the free lanes that we own. But on their lanes, they're banning trucks. And that's what happened on that road. That's why you see all the trucks on the free lanes, because they're banned from using those toll lanes. So it's really not going to help us a lot. And for those toll lanes there, for 10 miles, it's $9.50. This is SR 91 out in Orange County, California. It was one of the first ones where this happened. How much is it going to cost you? That's what everybody really wants to know, right? And that's like adding. If you have to pay 75 cents a mile, let's just say you average 20 miles to the gallon, that's like adding $15 to every gallon of gas you buy. Versus a gas tax funded road is 1 to 2 cents a mile versus 75 cents a mile. You see the explosion in the cost of transportation by doing it this way? And then if it's a central operated road, that would mean $19.50 a day if you have to do it round trip. $100 a week, nearly $5,000 a year in new taxes to get around. And Centra's own forecasts show that only 8% of the cars are ever going to be able to afford to use this. So we're building a massive network of underutilized roads that very few of us can access. And for what? And they're putting $2 billion of public money into those projects, but you won't be able to drive them unless you pay Centra a toll. So a gas tax funded road is pennies a day versus tolls dollars a day. And remember, it's not what they say, it's what they do. Look at all the great talk these guys had, but they all voted for toll roads anyway. It says, Warren Chisholm, you probably remember him, who's actually running for railroad commissioner this last time around, but back when he was a state rep, said, selling highways is not politically correct in this state. I don't care how much they get for it. When you have an agency that's run amok, you have to exercise some oversight, which they do not do. Then Kevin Altype, kind of near this way, he's off east of you, but he says, I think we've created a monster in the Texas Department of Transportation. I think we're headed in the totally wrong direction. And yet they didn't do anything. Another one, we gave them too much authority and trusted them too much. That's Joe Pickett out of El Paso. Former State Senator John Lindsay said in the Houston Chronicle in an editorial that same year, selling our state highways to anyone is terrible public policy, and the demands TxDOT is making are tantamount to extortion. And that is what they're doing to a lot of our elected officials in their defense. Yet, they failed to institute any reforms at TxDOT while continuing to sell our infrastructure to these foreign corporations. They continue to divert gas tax money and rely on tolling as their bailout. So is this the next bailout? Well, toll roads were promised to end our revenue shortfalls and to end our congestion problems when they've actually fixed neither. Again, because so few people can access them, they're lying fallow. They're just empty. Like SH 130 segments 1 through 4, and now that the Central segments are open, I would just surmise that if people can't afford to take the first 45 miles, they probably can't add another 41 miles in tolls to that too. Just a little guess. Then number 2, we're now $31 billion in debt for toll roads. And there's not enough traffic to cover all the debt that we've entered into on these toll roads, which is forcing even greater toll hikes and public subsidies. They've just raised your toll rates up here last year, a 32% rate hike, and they're programmed now to automatically increase every year for quite a number of years. Third, taxpayers are being set up for an infrastructure bailout that's deemed too big to fail. This sea of red ink is going to be paid back by the taxpayer. I don't care what they say about the private entities getting the risk. They have set up these deals, they've outlawyered us, and they are certainly going to get us to pay to bail them out, just like they did with the TARP and subprime mortgage crisis. Then we have some interesting quotes from your Dallas former North Texas Tollway Authority chairman. His name is Victor Vandergriff. He now got tapped to run the motor vehicles department. But back when he was the RNTTA director, he said that even they are expressing concern about the unsustainability of what's going on. He said people are going to realize that every new road in the Metroplex is going to be a toll road. And he's right. Even our free roads will soon have a toll component. He also said that they worry that adding too many tolls too quickly could erode the one thing that makes them a valuable tool in the first place, the willingness of drivers to pay them. Vandergriff has told lawmakers recently that all but the Dallas North Tollway aren't working, meaning they're unsustainable and aren't attracting enough traffic to pay for themselves. So that means you and I are subsidizing these things with massive amounts of loans or gas tax money. Some other examples from around the state. Graham Parkway. I call this the road for ExxonMobil because literally it's out in the Greenfield area, no congestion whatsoever, and yet they're going to spend a total of $4.8 billion over the next 4 years to build this road for Exxon employees. Which last I checked, Exxon probably has the money there to build a road to if they want to do a private road. But anyway, it's a Greenfield project. $350 million in our gas taxes are going into building just the first 2 segments right now. Yet you're going to have to pay, you and I, all of us are going to have to pay a toll if we want to use that road. So it's a double tax. MOPAC in Austin also, using $230 million in TxDOT funds, they are going to still charge a toll to toll MOPAC. And on that project, what's so dangerous about it is part of MOPAC goes over these bridges, because we have lots of waterways under our freeways. And instead of expanding the bridge, they're trying to shrink and fit all these new toll lanes. There's about, I think, 2 on each side, so it's like 4 altogether, plus the existing lanes. And they're taking the shoulders and turning them into lanes, and they're shrinking the width of the free lanes while keeping the toll lanes nice and wide. So what happens when, from plenty of construction that I've seen all through here in Fort Worth, that when they have construction, they shrink and narrow the lanes. They take away your shoulder, and everybody's got to sort of slow down to get through there because you're panicked because you might hit a car next to you or whatever with your mirrors and stuff. Well, they're going to make that permanent. And I actually talked to the former TxDOT engineer that told me that they have 9 design exceptions on that project because of how they're doing the configuration of how you weave the traffic from the middle fast lane. So it's like your HOV lanes here. We've got all these people going really fast. How do they get out into traffic that's dead stopped? And between that and the shrinking of the lane width will guarantee fatalities. They told me that they are literally designing this road in a way that they know will cause fatalities, all so that they can make a buck. Then, this is a federal bill that just passed this last summer. It's a 2-year federal highway bill. It actually increases the borrowing of the TIPIA loan program, and 99.9% of the TIPIA loans go to private operators like Cintra. Okay, not to the highway department, but to Cintra. They increased it by nearly a factor of 10. It was almost $100 million a year loan that they would give out. Break it up to various states. It's now almost $1 billion a year in borrowing of money we don't have. In fact, they passed a 2-year bill and funded it over 10 years of taxes for a 2-year bill. It allows TxDOT to do anything they want in existing right-of-way without public hearings. They completely changed the public hearing process and the public involvement process and how they can do this. They can slap managed toll lanes down the middle of any highway in our state, hand it over to Cintra, charge you 75 cents a mile, and you don't even so much as get word of it in a public hearing. That's how bad it is. And Brandon Hutchison wasn't my favorite person either, but she was one of the few that fought for us in Congress and in the Senate to get a ban on tolling existing interstates, but it's always been done. She's only been able to tack it on temporarily to appropriations bills, so it expires every year when the appropriations bills expire. So we need to make that permanent, and that's one of our goals on the federal level in the next 2 years when this comes up again. And it also advances the Trans-Texas Corridor and trade corridors through lots of funding of these projects on the federal level. Now, recently up here, you might have heard a couple of hearings that happened in October, is that your RTC or your MPO, Regional Transportation Council as it's called, is transitioning your HOV lane policy to something called hot lanes. Of course, HOV stands for high occupancy vehicle. Hot lane stands for high occupancy toll. So what they consider this is they're going to sell their excess capacity on those HOV lanes to single occupancy cars or SOVs if they pay a toll to use it. And so I asked them, I just recently published an article, and that's one of the things that actually we're passing around. It's my article on your HOV policy change. Read that if you will, because it's very interesting. I interviewed a couple of your officials here at the North Texas COG and your RTC that told me that, I said, well, isn't that a counterintuitive? Isn't the HOV lane, the purpose is supposed to get cars off the road, right? You get more people in one car, so you get fewer cars on the other lanes. I said, how is allowing people into the HOV lane working for your HOV policy? Not that I'm for HOV, but I'm just trying to catch on a contradiction. She didn't really have a good answer for that. But they said, basically, we've got as many people as we're going to be able to get in the HOV lanes already. And now we get complaints all the time about how empty they are. And I said, well, why don't you just open it up for everybody to use? You know, why have this status thing that you're either carpool or you got to pay something to get access to something we've already paid for? Those lanes are built and paid for, and they're going to charge us a toll. Well, the whole reason why all this is happening is because Cintra's managed toll lanes, also hot lanes, are opening next year. And some of them, right now your policy is currently, HOV is 2 people in your car. Well, now they're going to up it to 3 people have to be in your car to get access to those lanes for free. It was hard enough to get 2 people to use those lanes, right? Imagine how few people are really going to be able to have the free ride with HOV. It's not going to happen. And all of this is being driven by private interests. I don't hear any of y'all, I haven't heard from the public that they're clamoring to have HOV lanes increase the occupancy. No, what they're saying at these meetings, and we did have people there that were saying this, that they just want those lanes opened up to everybody. Then here's some cronyism that's happening. All right, we all love that, right? Well, Denton County Judge Mary Horn on this I-35 toll project, just as an example, her husband used to be a former state representative many years ago, and back then they purchased the property for I-35 East during his tenure. She then became county judge over time. That county, while she was county judge, put up $600 million for that toll project. She also served on your RTC. She lobbied heavily. I watched her in Austin. Lobbied for the I-35 toll project to be a public-private partnership. She wanted it to go to one of these private corporations. And she heads the I-35 East Coalition with the Dallas Regional Mobility Council. The day after TxDOT purchased her property, I'm assuming that she arranged it without eminent domain. She settled on something. They issued a statement that TxDOT was out of funding and suddenly had to toll the road. Mary Horns never disclosed that she owned property along I-35 and that she would receive a benefit if the project went through. Now, the fair market value for vacant commercial tracts, according to tax rolls, run between $3 and $6 a foot in that area. The Horns received $23.67 per square foot, 4 to 8 times more than the average for that area. And they purchased this property for $62,000 in 1994 and got nearly $1 million from TxDOT. Do you think that's how they may be buying your county judges to get them to support selling off our infrastructure to private companies? Then we're throwing good money after that. We're in a sea of red ink. We're actually opening roads in Austin. There's a road called 45 Southeast. It connects to the SH-130 toll road. That was 100% paid for with gas tax money. And yet they're opening it as a toll road to cover the sea of red ink on the losses we're experiencing on SH-130 that's not cash flowing. And this is all a big, massive tax, a double tax scheme. The same thing happened on the Katy Freeway Managed Lane project where they have the toll lanes down the middle of I-10 in Houston, 100% paid for with gas tax money. Nobody should have to pay a toll or be in a HOV or carpool to get access to that lane. We've paid for it already. Second, Texans have had to pay $100 million already in our gas taxes to cover the debt service payments that they can't cover on SH-130. So we're exacerbating double taxation with Robin Hood on top of it. We need to educate your groups and arm them with information and be active during the next session. I cannot tell you how important it is to get on the phone. That's why it's important, if you don't mind, to sign up for our email alerts, because I follow all this legislation, and when a bill's about to be heard in committee or about to be on the floor for a vote, we need the phones ringing. Because all they see up there generally is me. There's some Austin activists that we can get there usually too, but it's hard for y'all to get down there. I mean, what's 5-6 hour drive or something? Or maybe not quite that much, but still. And then sit there all day long and wait for the bill to be called. And they may not call it that night. They may say, oh, we're going to push it to tomorrow. And they do this routinely. When they see a big crowd, they don't want to hear and be stuck listening to public testimony. So they'll just not hear the bill that day and send you all home and make you come back the next day. Well, who can just sit around Austin and do this kind of stuff? It's crazy. So we would really need your help, and we can activate you and tell you, what bills and what they involve and all that good stuff. And it's just a matter of telling them, please oppose or vote no against XYZ bill, or please vote for XYZ bill. Here's what we want. Sustainable, affordable road policy that's freely accessible for everybody, not based on status. Because I don't know if you heard this too, that now disabled veterans also get to use the toll roads for free, which is, I love our veterans, don't get me wrong, but if we start giving all these status, different people of different statuses a free ride, then who's stopped paying the bill for everything else? So we need to stop building roads with debt. Toll road debt and costs of the bureaucracy is unacceptable, unaffordable, and clearly unsustainable. 2, end all road tax diversions, not just the gas taxes, but those vehicle sales tax dollars. $3 billion a year should be going to roads. No unelected board should have taxing authority. We need to increase the efficiency and stop the wasteful spending at TxDOT. Since they've done all these innovative financing, our engineering cost has gone from somewhere from 3 to 5% up to 20% per project for just engineering when they outsource it. 4, we need to stop using taxpayer money to subsidize these or toll projects, including privatizing our public infrastructure. 5, we need to end non-traditional financing schemes, these risky leveraged debt things. It's public money for private profits, and it means bailouts are coming. And number 6, we would like to see them opt out of our federal highway program and keep 100% of Texas money in our state. Revenue if it's needed from the gas tax diversions that they're already stealing from our road money, and vehicle sales tax. We think that that's all we need. In fact, we talked with the TxDOT executive director in September, a couple months ago now, And he said that's all he really needs is $4 billion more a year. That's $4 billion a year. We don't need to raise taxes. We can do it. If we have the fiscal discipline and wherewithal to help these guys find their spine and to cut spending where we need to. And based upon careful study, this is John Corona, he's not exactly as conservative, but he's right on this, that gas tax is by far the most conservative way to build and maintain our Texas roads. So now's your chance to be heard. You guys have an opportunity just this week to go to the Texas Transportation Commission meeting. It's in Arlington. They often will change the location of where they hold their commission hearings. They're usually in Austin, but they like to go around the state and hold hearings. Well, there's 2 agenda items on there this week that relate to some toll projects in this area. If you're interested, it's going to be at the Rangers Ballpark Hall of Fame Theater, 1000 Ballpark Way in Arlington. You probably have heard of it or at least know of it. It starts at 9 o'clock is when they convene. And this is agenda item 3 and 4. 3 is involving a design-build contract. To me, it's likely to be a toll road. It's called the Dallas Horseshoe Project. It involves I-30 and I-35. And I say that because it says design-build and possibility of maintaining. Well, there's no way that the project developer is going to have money to maintain the road unless they had imposed a toll to do that, because they don't have access to gas tax money. They're not the highway department. So design-build is basically a truncated public-private partnership. The full-blown concession, like Centra has on SH-130 and the Trans-Texas Corridor type model, is design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. Those are all the steps. And so design-build is kind of a truncated version of that. But if they're having the option to maintain, then that means it's going to be a toll project and likely a privatized one. So you would want to speak out on that. Agenda item number 4 designates I-30 as the North Channel Express and I-635 and Dallas and Denton counties as toll projects, which they have to do. It's a formality. They've already got environmental clearance to do this, and they've already got it half built, but it's part of their formalities. But it gives you an opportunity. If you sign up for those agenda items, you can speak to those specific items at the commission instead of waiting for citizens to be heard at the very end of the meeting, which can be a very long meeting usually. So you can sign up for those specific agenda items and tell them what you think about this shift to tolling and privatizing, particularly in your area, because they're in your backyard this week. So that would be important. And I would encourage you to find like-minded patriots on this and build coalitions. You're welcome to sign up for our email alerts. I also do Facebook and Twitter. Particularly, I'm really into the Facebook online stuff during the session. And if you want to build a transportation team, I will help you do that, to watchdog these issues, even if it's just a matter of communicating with us of what's going on in Austin, so you can communicate to your group and prioritize what bills you want to focus on. Love to do that. And one of the handouts that I was handing out gives a good list, a short list like this, of what you can say to your lawmakers of what you do and don't want on transportation policy. Like, we don't want these public-private partnerships. We don't want any taxpayer money going into a toll road. If it can't pay for itself with the uses of the road, then don't build it as a toll road. Right? Yep. They shouldn't be double taxing us for these roads. TxDOT's out of control, has too much power to tax. They've got to rein this in. They cannot tax. They found a way that, it'd be like, I mean, it's pretty much what's happening with the property tax in our appraisal districts, you know, where you give these school boards all this authority to basically set your property tax rate, and look what happens to your property taxes. So that's what's happening now with TxDOT. It's just this out-of-control means for them to increase our taxes. C, no tolls on existing roads. There are loopholes. Don't let them tell you otherwise. I remember even Perry saying it during the debates, was it now, 2 years ago, where he was saying, oh, no, the legislature took care of that. They can't toll existing roads in Texas. Well, I'll show you the statute if you want. There's 7 loopholes. Also, no more debt. No more debt. And then end diversions completely. That keeps it simple, right? So anyway, I know I've thrown a lot at you. So if you have questions, I would welcome them now. But we have also had a documentary filmmaker. That's why I have The Truth Be Told up there. He's a San Antonio filmmaker, but he's done things for the Discovery Channel and the History Channel. He's done Hollywood features. Very great job he does on this. He's been following our issue now for going on 8 years doing this. Crazy. I'm like, I want my life back now. But anyway, and he's done now 4 documentaries on this. So you can go online. He's put a lot of them up on YouTube. You have to watch them in segments and all, but they're all there for you to watch if you're interested in seeing the battle and what's going on, the history of all this. And to keep informed of all the current events of what's going on transportation, please do either sign up on our board that's going around, or you can also sign up directly online at texasturf.org under Get Our Email Alerts. So we'd love to stay in touch. So what kind of questions do you all have? What can I answer? Yes, ma'am.
Don't we have